everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Tutti by Cosey Fanni Tutti. Cosey Fanni Tutti is one of the most important figures in industrial music, mostly known for being in the legendary industrial band Throbbing Crystal. Throbbing Crystal, despite their short career, had a huge influence in the music industry, being one of the originators of industrial music. Each individual afterwards had still a huge part in the music industry, whether with their solo works or with their inclusion on bands like Psychic TV, Coil, Cum Transmissions and so many others. Cosey Fanni Tutti, of course, is not an exception. She's an extremely important figure when it comes to some music ideas which, especially back in the day, would sound completely taboo. All the members of Throbbing Crystal were way ahead of their time, with their ideas shaping the future that was about to come, in a scene where nobody would believe them. The first installment in Cosey Fanni Tutti's solo career is the album Time to Tell back in 1983, which is an insane and obscure industrial noise spoken word album. If you count out though the album's electronic ambient remixes 2 and 4, and also the album Koch Plays Cosey, Tutti is actually the second album for after more than 30 years. That's a huge comeback. Of course, I had no idea what I would anticipate from this album, but I heard it as fast as possible when it came out. And this was definitely not what I would expect, but that's for a good thing because I was pleasantly surprised with this release. This new album has an industrial feel to it, but it goes more to post-industrial and industrial techno music. There are still some of the elements that make it for a dark ambient and kind of weird album, but it's more upbeat, it's a bit more catchy, it has elements that will remind you of glitch and IDM, and people who are not in the underground or just the obscure scene can easily get into this album and find lots of good and interesting moments. For me personally, the album just lacks of a structure behind it. Some of the tracks can get quickly repetitive, and there's also a predictable structure in between 4 or 5 minutes of each song, but it has some sounds that are heavily futuristic. Some of the synth melodies have a bit of a 90s feel, but also sound quietly refreshing. And getting into track by track, Tutti is a great starting point. Like I said at the beginning, it's an unexpected sound and direction from Tutti compared to what we've been used to from her previous works. It has dark psychedelic sounds. The one element that makes it a bit of a Cosey Fanni Tutti album are some of the horn sections and the trumpets being filled in reverb and creating a haunting atmosphere, which there are not a lot in the album. This is one of the very few songs that actually uses horns, but their inclusion in actually lots of portions throughout the song makes it for a better and more captivating and dark experience. Also, like I said, it has post-industrial and industrial techno sounds, and it has this acid synth and this catchy feel to it, and yeah, it makes for a very good opener. Drone goes into the same dark direction. It's more calm though than energetic, but the glitchy and IDM feel of the beat sounds refreshing. More has a bit of a tribal experimental aesthetic at the beginning. After that, it's building to a minimal futuristic beat, and it's another song that it has a bit of an industrial techno feel to it, or more like ambient techno in this particular case. It's one of those moments where you kinda sense that the structure and the build up of the songs doesn't go to something that much further than what we've been used to from the previous tracks, and it kind of loses touch with a sense of a better progression. Though things change with the next track, Sophic. Not only it has the darkest melody of the album so far, especially in the beginning, the sounds that are presented later are heavily industrial, and on one hand they feel like something you might hear out of an old Throbbing Crystal release, but on the other hand it feels like a soundtrack of a 90s action/horror game getting place in a far future. It's a great song and it gives me old like 90s 2000s vibes. Split is another song that gets more into the ambient direction, and it gets riskier with its structure and its multiple phases of different industrial sounds, but it's not as memorable or impressive. It's still a decent moment in the album though. The song Heliy starts dark like the rest of the tracks, but ends up being the catchiest one of the album. The quirky synths give a completely different feel to the song, but it works for the better, and the inclusion of Cosey's vocals in this song, filled with lots of reverb, make it even better. N has a dark and haunting atmosphere, especially with its experimental horn sounds. This is the other song I was talking about earlier that has a horn section. But this one, it's kind of minimal. It feels like something out of a Throbbing Crystal release back in the day. It's actually probably the most reminiscent song of this era of music. But it's not one of my favorites in the album. I think it kind of loses focus and touch after a while. It doesn't progress that well as a song. And Orenda keeps the minimal ambient approach from the previous song and it makes it for a decent finisher. And it's also something not as dark and industrial. I would even say this last one reminds me of some of Brian Eno's works back in the day. That was a nice dark ambient, minimal, post-industrial techno album with some very good moments, but it's mostly just a decent release. I would be honest that I would expect something more from her, especially after such a long period of time, after such a huge comeback, but I still wasn't sure what to expect. That was a pleasant surprise with the change of sound and direction. It has some nice and refreshing ideas, also having a futuristic idea of the old school, and it makes it for an album that is at least satisfying. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm gonna give this album a 7 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.